Good afternoon. I am Valerie Alston and the author of The Student's Comprehensive Guide for College and Other Life Lessons. I wrote the book to assist high school students and their parents to navigate the journey of careers in college. I am also the host of the Employer Speaks series, which is designed to highlight different careers and the paths to achieving those careers. Today, we have a very special guest, Keisha Boyles. She has over 17 years of professional experience working as a licensed, certified social worker clinical. She also is a certified grief and loss specialist through the National Institute for Trauma and Loss in Children. Her master's degree was obtained at Wayne State University in Michigan and her bachelor's of arts degree from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, with a special concentration focusing on social inequalities, specifically in race, class, and gender. Keisha enjoys working with children, families, and adults to administer treatment that evokes healing and wellness for all stakeholders. We are going to have an in-depth discussion about the role of a school social worker and the benefits to children and families in need. Thank you for watching.
Okay.
So, Keisha, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
When there's no social worker in the school,
Okay.
what do families do?
So I always instruct the families to still ask and request to speak to a social worker. And that request, if a social worker is not specifically assigned to that school, our department will assign what's called like an itinerant social worker. So a school social worker who may be housed in another school will come over and do the same assessment to determine what the need is, to see if social work services are definitely needed, or if it needs to be something that's referred out to another provider, or even like a provider within the school. So always ask. I always tell them, always ask, because it is available, even if someone is not specifically assigned to your school.
How many social workers are there normally within the system?
Oh, yes.
Has there been a need?
Oh, yes, definitely. With everything like we talked about earlier, with just the mental health needs of students, we're learning that a lot of students are exhibiting symptoms early on, like elementary level, middle school, that symptoms don't just start when they're 18 and over. And so we want to help to intervene as early as possible. Mm-hmm. So definitely there is a need. For example, when I joined my department, we were about 50, there was about 50 of us in the whole school district. Now we've grown over the last 7 years to over 125 of us. And so that definitely speaks to the need that we need more support in the mental health and behavioral health areas as our schools continue to service children from all over. So the need has grown.
And when you, as a social worker or at a school, maybe new school, maybe a school that you're at, but they may need new personnel, what do you do to let them know this is what I do as a social worker? Is that even a thing?
Oh yeah, definitely. We do what's called a presentation. It's a PowerPoint presentation where we explain to school staff our role and what things we do, like basically what certifications we hold, what our licensure level is, and then we explain how do we service students and support staff in this role as a school social worker.
As opposed to a guidance counselor, because they're expecting certain things?
Yes, so the PowerPoint just helps to really iron out and you know, if they have a specific question about, you know, well, I referred this case to you, but you didn't take the case. And so we can help explain to them that we go through an assessment process that determines if the case should be my case, if it needs to have social work intervention, or if it needs school counselor intervention, or even just referred out to a different type of resource. So really just being able to consult with staff and even with families to help them understand these are the criteria that that have to be met in order for us to open up an actual case. So it definitely is definitely as a need, but we have to get that parent permission in order to even do the research and determine if we can open up a case.
So you mentioned earlier that there what's called an individual education program. I think that was the term that you
Plan, yes, yes.
And so would you explain what that is again, just a little bit more? And then how has COVID-19 impacted IEP services? And are there any workarounds for that?
So the IEP comes out of a federal law that is called the acronym is IDEA, and it's the Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act. And this allows for schools to provide a plan to have in place in order to help this student access their education with this qualifying diagnosis in place. And literally it's a team meeting, which sometimes can consist of the student themselves, depending on their maturity level. And also the parent is a team member, the teacher, the special education teacher. It may be myself, it might be occupational therapist, a physical therapist. So it can be a really big team. Sometimes it's just a small team where it's just the social worker and the special educator. So it really depends on the diagnosis, and it depends on what the need is to help support the student in accessing their instruction.
Okay. And again, it feels like you have all of these various, we call them shareholders or stakeholders, stakeholders, and that teachers are involved, because you can look at that marker of has the behavior changed. You have the parent involved, you have the student involved. It's just not something that you just say, okay, this child, what is it? They used to say, bad seed. It's not a bad seed. There are reasons why a child is acting the way he or she is working. Exactly. Now, has COVID-19 had any impact on these IEPs because of
yes,
not doing face-to-face types of things? And what?
Yes, definitely. We have experienced a lot of that. Some of the children are having a difficult time logging onto a computer to talk to their teacher or to talk to their service provider. They're used to the hands-on activities. They're used to being able to, hey, if I need you, I know where your office is and I can leave you a note, or I can, talk to the principal and say, hey, can Ms. Broyle stop by the classroom? I wanted to talk to her about something. So I think it's a little bit harder because we're all in this setting. But we're still providing services, even virtually, if the parent consents and says, yes, I want to continue with the services on the IEP. We have a consent form specifically for our specialty that they complete, and then we could do what's called like the virtual telemental health sessions via online. So it looks different. But it's the same delivery, same concept of we want to, make sure families feel connected, the children still feel connected, even if it's just through the laptop or the device, and continue to work on those skills that we know will help them to become more successful. So you can still build relationships even though we're not physically in the same building together. You can still practice self-management even though we're not in the school building.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, I keep saying that, but in this day and age, there's still some families that don't have access to the internet. They don't have access to broadband communication. And if that is the case, where it's almost like a black hole of no communication, do you all go old school and talk on the phone?
Yes, actually, yes.
What do y'all do?
If a student or a family, if they don't have access to a device, that has video and audio, then we can talk on the telephone. We've been doing actually a lot of phone calls just to help check in on families to make sure they're doing okay. And also if a student says, I don't want to meet with you on the computer via video, I'd rather talk to you on the telephone, and we can do that too. So it's really based off of the comfort level of the student and family.
Right. So again, it's that communication line. It has to really remain open to make sure the child as well as the parent is comfortable.
Exactly, exactly.
All right. So since we're talking about COVID-19, I'm going to ask you this as a social worker, because again, you're looking at the broad picture of what's happening to our kids. Have there been any, and I've seen it on the news, but I'm going to ask you because you're right there on the front line. Have there been any unique mental health needs that you've observed from students because of COVID-19?
Yes, definitely. I would just say in general within the homes, you know, when we're calling to check in on families, I'm oftentimes kind of giving that reassurance to that parent to let them know that, you know, we're in this together. We'll get through it together. You know, there's not that hard expectation that it's going to be perfect and work out every time. So really, COVID-19 definitely has caused a lot more anxiety, a lot more stress in households as people are wondering when we're going to re-enter the school building, when is it safe. Some students and families are, you know, have gone through some changes. You know, some have lost jobs, and so it's caused more stress in the household. So we're working to again, meet those basic needs. If it's getting food, like finding a resource for food, then that's what we're doing to help support in any way we can to help support families. So it may be even finding a resource to help them with a security deposit if they are no longer able to stay where they were staying. So it literally is a range, but COVID-19 has definitely impacted and disrupted a lot within our school system. But we're definitely stepping up to the plate and doing what we can to help support families as best we can. So I've even done a couple home visits where we had to practice social distancing, we were masked, but we were able to address, you know, maybe an attendance issue. Or there was literally, you know, I've delivered a couple boxes of food to some families. So I'm like, so there are some things we can still do, but we're, you know, practicing, you know, those CDC guidelines and say, okay, I'll set the box down. Okay, when I leave, then you can come pick it up, you know. So I think it's just.
Let me interject on that.
Mhm.
From when COVID-19 started,
Mhm.
schools were shut off.
Yes.
To now, what is one thing that if you had to do over again that you would consider doing? I know it gives you thinking on top of your head.
Just one.
One thing that you would
One
change.
thing. One thing that I would do over. Honestly, what's so important now is really having the skills to now conduct your services online. So that means a lot more planning is being done off hours, or however you want to describe it, outside of the work hours, just to make just to make sure that you're presenting a skill that's engaging to the student, because literally they're just sitting there looking at a computer screen. So we can't just talk back and forth all the time. They may need to have some visual stimulation, meaning that they may need to see like a video or something that will help them stay engaged. Some I can talk and we can have our little 30-minute session and we talk back and forth. Others, you know, we have to incorporate more kind of visual things and movement, like incorporating movement into our sessions. So I would say if I could redo anything is maybe have that skill already fully in place versus learning it as I'm going. Just knowing how to present, you know, presentations in our sessions where we're putting something on Google Slide and then playing a video, teaching them relaxation techniques. And literally where, you know, we show, I'm like, I'm in my house, you're in your house, and let's, you know, do starfish breathing together. And we do that together.
So communication, and these new skills that we had to learn, a different way of communicating.
Exactly.
So that puts me into the next question.
Okay.
What are some of the successes and challenges that you have faced as a social worker?
Oh, wow. I would definitely say the challenge is always when you can have that family, say, thank you so much for working with me. Or you actually see the change happen before your eyes, where this student may have not been able to attend to class, but for 5 minutes, and now they're sitting for an hour and they're able to, successfully engage. It definitely is a range with the successes. I would say some of the, I guess you could say, disappointments have been, I think it's hard to, as social workers, we work most of the time in host settings. And what that means is that I may work in a school system and I'm an expert at my profession in that school system, but I'm not the main entity, like the main profession. So we know the main profession in schools are teachers. And so sometimes we may have a little difficulty with roles and who's supposed to do what. Or some people may have already in their mind, like their expectation of what a social worker should do, and so I think sometimes that can be a little bit of a setback when you have to kind of re-examine and explain to other professionals, like, this is my role, this is what I do, these are the things that I cannot do. And with our profession, we have a code of ethics that we have to abide by. And a lot of other professions and employers don't realize that. But not only are we governed by our board, but as a social worker, you also have a set of ethics that you have to abide by as it relates to providing services to a child, to an adult, to a family. So once we get that,
like a doctor, we can talk about malpractice and doing the wrong thing. So
exactly,
that what governs how you treat
exactly,
family, the children, or the
exactly.
Have they made you more resilient, more effective in your professional career? Like you said, talking to a teacher and letting her know this is what I do. So you have to actually explain it and break it down to them. So how have these successes and challenges made you more resilient and effective?
I would say the experience, just being able to say, okay, it's been 17 years and I'm still going strong. Definitely gives you that courage to continue going and knowing that, okay, these are the types of issues that I'm seeing. So what can I do to prepare myself for the next one? Because I always tell myself, when one issue comes, it'll come back again and it'll repeat itself through another student, through another professional. And so I want to make sure I give myself the tools. So that means I may want to go attend some trainings that are specific to school social workers and helping us to continue to craft and to make sure the world knows what is a school social worker when someone says that's what they are. So it's really just getting yourself prepared and providing those opportunities with your employer. Like I said, some employers will provide what's called continuing education credits. Some do not, and you have to seek them on your own. And so that's a way to keep yourself fresh and I would say resilient, because you're getting the latest updated information and research on how to implement different strategies or what is all involved in this type of diagnosis and what's the best treatment plan for this or that. So definitely that's another key feature is the continuing education credits, where our license requires us to have so many every time we renew our license. But I think even if we didn't have that requirement, I would still want to pursue that because it helps me to stay fresh on information and resources so that I know kind of how to combat some of the issues that I may be coming my way.
Well, all I can say is that you're an exemplary example of your profession. You have given me something deep to think about in terms of knowing what a social worker does. And we're not talking just a social worker, licensed, certified social worker, clinical, knowing what they do and how they can help not only our children, but our community, adults, and families. And that's so important that we recognize what your role is, because it's an important role.
And so thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for sitting with me and giving me such a detailed description and effective communication method, in that if I ever have a problem, now I see someone who has a problem, I say, "You've spoken to your school social worker?"
Perfect. Yes, that's definitely what we want. I thank you for this opportunity, because I also want people to know that we're not what you see on in the movies. I think there's like a negative connotation put on social workers when we go into kind of the entertainment world. But the reality is that we want you to experience something different. So we want to have that relationship that we build with you, and let that relationship grow into other relationships. So definitely, I appreciate this experience, and anytime.
Well, thank you so much. And again, you're an exemplary example of social worker. And thank you so much for being on Employer Speaks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.